of Live Free with Rebecca Bush. Sorry about being a little late. I was hoping to start at 4, but I'm not the best with tech. I am joined by my friend Agora, though. He was here as my emotional support animal. And he even has his little farm bandana on. So he's looking spiffy. And for this episode today, I am super excited to have Nicole Sauce joining virtually. She is in Tennessee. She has Living Free in Tennessee. She runs the Self Reliance Festival. And of course, I'm sure many of you are familiar with Holler Roast. She has delicious coffee beans. We serve it every year at the Exit and Build Land Summit. And speaking of, Nicole Sauce will actually be joining us this year at the Exit and Build Land Summit as a speaker. So really excited to invite her onto the show. Yay! Hi, Nicole. Thank you for joining today. All right. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, I'm sure folks on our audience are very familiar with you, but maybe a quick introduction for folks who have never stumbled across you or your work before.
Well, I'm Nicole Sauce from the Living Free in Tennessee podcast, and I just realized I'm like 90 miles from my mic. I kind of moved over to be in frame with you. So, yeah, I have a podcast called Living Free in Tennessee that I started because while I had been building freedom into my life through public policy action and a bunch of other things and homesteading, I ended up creating a life for myself that was not what I wanted. And I built a nonprofit and ended up the administrator, which meant I wasn't doing the thing I wanted to do, which was help the people that the nonprofit was helping. And when I realized that, I also realized I had no creative outlet, and I'm a very creative person. So I started this podcast talking about growing and preserving food and building freedom into your life and resilience into your life. And it grew. Been doing it for 7 years now. It's grown into a movement. We have a wonderful community here. I have neighbors around me that we call the Holler neighbors, and we call ourselves an unintentional, intentional community. Like, we have become intentional about how we work together, but we accidentally ended up moving all next to each other with shared values, and really into freedom, really into the Agora, all of the things that I know Live Free Academy is for, and super. Something I realized that recently is that a lot of us get drawn to this world because we're passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And we underplay how important it is to also make money to pay for things. Like, we're almost embarrassed to say, hey, I'm also doing this to make money. And I had this conversation like a week ago with somebody who's like, why do you do content creation? He said, to make money. And I was like, okay. I usually talk about the community first because I do this to build community, and I want to equip as many people as possible to build freedom into your life. But it's very hard to build freedom if you don't also take care of the income side of the equation, because that's how you end up in relationships that have bad boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that something that you've really cultivated in your career is this like synergistic and holistic approach to entrepreneurship, but also like having an emphasis on just incorporating that into the homestead, and like how you have the unintentional community and folks around who can barter with and trade with, and it's like it's all connected, right? And there's, I don't know, maybe this generalization that things have to be separate, but it's really like, actually, if you're giving and, contributing to your community, which maybe is your number one focus, but that's actually going to enhance your ability to earn an income and provide for yourself and have abundance, and then put that back into the projects on the land and, bartering with other neighbors and things like this. But so I also came from a policy background, and then was kind of like, oh, shoot, this is not the way. But I didn't realize this, but you brought Joel Salatin as a speaker, right? You were like kind of behind that for the State Policy Network in Oklahoma, right? That year. I was at that event that year. So that's so funny.
We probably met, and I was really frazzled at that event.
That speech, though, was what really set me on my path, because I had never stumbled across Joel Salatin before. And like, for folks who aren't coming from a policy background, the State Policy Network, the Kochtopus, the fiscal conservative movement, which really is kind of like the Ron Paul door opening is how a lot of people, I think, got into this free market movement or liberty movement or whatever you want to call it. Like, how have you perceived things evolving from that point? Because I know for me personally, like where we are today with the exit and build movement, like this seems like a lot of progress in just 10 years. Like, what have you seen in that way, and like these epiphanies that people are having that like voting is not the solution?
Well, voting isn't the solution. We had Super Tuesday yesterday. I 100% have no idea what happened. And like in my state policy network days, I would have been glued to the TV, like watching it all go down. But I realized statistically, like literally, my vote does not matter in Tennessee. And the influencing your local politics is actually something that you can put your hands on.
Yeah.
But when you get into that bigger world, it's there's a lot of backdoor trading going on. And what I saw happen in the public policy arena, and I still have a lot of friends in there who are fighting every day to lower regulation. But what I observed, and there was this moment where it's like, you know what, the system's set up to propagate itself, right? And that means that we are using a system that's set up to eventually be abusive to you and me to try to fix itself. And so
Yeah.
we
How
would
does make it make
win. We'd like
sense?
have a big win and be like, yeah, we got school vouchers. And then we'd like lose our butts on another policy issue. And all I realized was that the more people who build entrepreneurship, self-reliance, and take control of their lives and their communities and build real strong community around them, like not because you live near each other, but because you have a shared purpose, then the less we even need to worry about the politics. Like that's just over there creating drama.
Yeah, it's almost like the parasitic system. Like the more energy you feed to it, if you're like glued to the TV and watching it, then obviously the more energy it gets. But if you just like completely close your eyes to that and you're just like 100% diverting your energy and attention to building and like creating and innovating and, finding maybe parallel institutions and alternative institutions and the counter economy, like focusing on that, then obviously the more energy and, momentum will be building in that regard. But for you, like you have this cool holler roast business. Like for folks who don't have a business yet or haven't really even dabbled or whatever the word is in entrepreneurship, like what's your story there, and how would you like suggest that people who want to maybe explore entrepreneurship get started? Because I know I've heard your story before, but for folks who haven't, even like buying the roaster machine seemed like a huge like investment, right? But it was like if you wouldn't have done that, then how would you have ever scaled the business? And like what was your story with entrepreneurship and how all that got started? And then maybe folks can think of like things they're passionate about and how they could make investments in themselves or their their entrepreneurial endeavor to get this kind of cottage industry or like whatever they're passionate about off the ground.
The first two investments you need to make are one in yourself and two in your relationships if you want to be a good entrepreneur. And I actually love watching you, Rebecca and John, just operate as a couple working towards the same thing. I think you're a power couple because you do that and very supportive of each other. And I think that's awesome. And having that foundation is very helpful. Does that mean you need to go find out, a partner, like romantic partner? Not necessarily, but I can say that everything I've started that's done well, it's because people saw me doing something and were like, I want to tell her story, or I want to help her because she's making a difference, or whatever it is. And that it goes from when I was working in public policy doing the nonprofit thing to Hollow Roast Coffee. I had been on the homestead for 3 years when I realized that coffee in Tennessee is terrible. There are more roasters now, but at the time it was just there was nothing. And I went out and I would like fly home to Oregon to visit my dad, and I'd come home with a suitcase full of craft roasted coffee every time. And I ran out of coffee, and I went to the store, and the only thing I had that was like not sort of Folgers grade or Maxwell House was Starbucks. And I got a bag of that, took it home, had a cup of coffee. It was terrible. It was terrible. I don't like Starbucks. I'm sorry. I'm sure people listening to this do, but it tasted burnt. And I started that day. I was already growing food. I was already raising chickens and selling eggs, like here and there, onesie twosie. And I went online and I learned that you can roast coffee in a cast iron skillet. And that's what I started doing. And then people started liking my coffee. And then I got this
Mm.
tiny little home roaster that does a half pound at a time. And I was fulfilling orders, like selling a pound of coffee, which meant I had to go through 2 roast cycles per pound to sell to send people coffee. And it was something I could kind of do while I was doing other things like building websites for people or whatever. I had I was always transitioning into this side hustle lifestyle. I always had different things going on. And then I went to Jack Spirko's spring workshop. It gave a presentation on how you can sort of do a side hustle thing with roasting coffee while you're doing other things on the homestead. And it can bring you in a little bit of, gas money. And
Yeah.
I'm standing in front of people. I was like, I'm not going to build this into a commercial thing because the next step is $20,000. And at that point, where my mind was there was no way in the world that I could ever feasibly come up with 20,000 extra dollars to start my business. And somebody came up to me after, and as I said it to people, I realized something. I realized I had been trying all these things and I really love coffee and I taste beans from farms from all over the world a couple times a year to choose what we're going to have at Holler Roast. And I really did want to go commercial. And what was in my way was that $20,000. 2 things happened. Jack walked up to me. He said, "You need to raise your prices," which I looked at him and there was that same voice in my head that said I couldn't raise $20,000. It said, "You can't raise your prices." And then I didn't say anything. I just stared at him and said nothing. And what I was thinking was, this man is more financially successful than I am.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go home and raise my prices. And like the worst thing that happens is the 10 or 20 customers I have get mad, right? Like so that change, I instantly started selling more coffee because it was in a price point that reached a target audience that had more disposable cash than what I was reaching before. And then the second thing was a guy named Brian Norton, who has a coffee brand called Food Forest Farm, walked up to me and said, "I know an interim step where you can get for about $4,000 a smaller roaster that's commercial grade. And
Mm.
it won't be $20,000." And I went home, I filled out the guest form to be on the Jack Spirko's show, and I decided to launch a Kickstarter pre-selling coffee to raise money for that roaster, and I funded that Kickstarter within 2 days of launching.
Oh my gosh.
And then I caught that roaster on fire 5 years later.
5 years later, though.
And I did another Kickstarter, and that Kickstarter, I did a pre-launch, and before I ever launched, I funded it, and then did like I 3x'd basically what I was going for on that one. So none of that would have happened without relationships and without having invested in myself to have like every time I didn't know what I was going to do, I did something. I learned to do something. So I knew how to make websites by the time I did this. I knew I basically kept up with social media. I wasn't like an awesome social media person, but I, wasn't afraid of using social media. I worked on my presentation skills like a
Mhm.
lot because I was a corporate facilitator. I put a lot of time in there. All of those things, and learning how to write songs, like all of those things ended up coming together in this one path. And Holler Roast has been my like solid bedrock for everything I do. Yes, I sell memberships to my podcast, and I do webinars, and I just wrote a book. So I have a book coming
Woo!
out this year.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've done all of these things, and they make some money, and I run events, as you know. And I speak at events, and those all bring in some money. But the thing that is like my solid bedrock has been Holler Roast since that time.
Yeah, and it's almost like also there's this barrier to entry for a lot of people who want to maybe start a business but are afraid to take that leap. And instead of being like, "Oh, I can't afford the coffee roaster," it's like, I can't afford not to get this coffee roaster, because like if you wouldn't have, found a solution and found a way to make it happen, then you never would have 3x. You never would have been able to scale like that. So it's like having that, how am I going to problem solve and like figure this out? Okay, I'll raise the prices. I'll do this. I'll make these changes. I'll do this Kickstarter. And then pew, just all starts to like manifest. But that's such an inspiring story. And I wanted you to tell that because like you were saying, you do need the financial resources in order to make, this lifestyle happen where you are able to, for you, live free in Tennessee, but like just in general, even like the podcast about live free, it's like, well, how do you like get out of the 9 to 5 rat race life or leave your full-time corporate job or your full-time job at a think tank doing like boring public policy work that you think is like going to change the world? But
if you work in public policy, you've already kind of taken one step away from sort of the real world in what they call the real world, the normies. But yeah.
It was like a bridge, right? Well, I kind of have a similar story too, because I was doing so I did the public policy work and was in that world. And then I started working at a US Senate campaign and was just like, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing this. I knew I wanted to do something where I was talking to people like face to face. And like, I enjoyed going to the farmers markets, but I never thought I could like start my own booth. But the news was always on at this US Senate job. And I was always getting incoming calls from people like complaining about the government, and they hated the senator because he's a rhino and this and this. And I was like, everyone's so upset about politics. What's the answer? And I'm like, I knew that it was like building the counter economy and like going local and all this. But my friend actually, also on the line of entrepreneurship, she would always say, necessity is the mother of invention, because for her, and I didn't invent the product that I ended up starting to sell at farmers markets, but she did. And it was because her daughter had really sensitive teeth. And when they would go to the store, they would go to the dentist to try to find solution. There was nothing out there that was working. So she found online these blogs about, use calcium bentonite clay or use activated charcoal. So she basically just combined the ingredients and made her own tooth powder for her daughter. And it helped with the sensitivity, but it also helped with teeth whitening. So anyway, out of this, necessity for her daughter, this cool product was born. And it was an opportunity for me. She said, hey, start working the farmers markets, start selling this product. So I got my toes wet and got to leave the policy world and enter this whole other universe. And like, here I am now a little over 10 years later. And it's like, wow, I, went to the farmer's market and saw the counter economy firsthand and saw these people who just started their own soap business, who just started their own Indian food meal prep business. Or, the list goes on and on, all sorts of artisan goods, baked goods, breads, all sorts of things. But it's like, even starting there, if you can get a $40 booth fee and you make $1,000 sales day and your inventory only costed you whatever, if you can put the time in, it's like, hey, that's a great place to start. But I really think it's cool what you've done with the coffee business and the story that you can tell others too, because it's like a way to, like you said, be able to do your events, be able to write a book, but still like have that monthly income to sustain yourself financially. But I didn't know you wrote a book, so let's talk about that. What's going on with this book?
Do you know where I'm launching this book?
What's it called?
It's at your event. That's where I'm launching it.
Let's go. I love it. So everybody has to come to the Exit and Build Summit because Nicole's launching her book.
I got to get my last edits in too. It's called My 3 Things. And when I talk about starting with yourself, what I mean by that is that when you create the life you want to live, the life you choose, and are no longer beholden to whatever exterior forces are keeping you, like the things that frustrate you. It could be if you're at a job that you have to go to your job. Now, if you can reframe that to, I get to go to my job so I can earn money for the things I like, and it builds a little bit of space so I can do my thing, that can actually, that perception of turning your job into a tool helps with that choking feeling of somebody else is living my life for me because I have to go to this job from 9 to 5. I went through a phase in my life where I did that. And when I realized that it was a tool and stopped having a victim mentality in the job, I was a better performer at work and became somebody that got promotions and that sort of thing. And then I could have chosen to stay there, but I actually used it to build space so that I could pursue side hustles. And then I was, like choosing what to do. But the book basically walks you through a process of setting your life strategic plan. So your
Mhm.
long-term vision of how you want your life to be, not like I want to be a veterinarian, but like what kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Do you want control over your schedule? Do you want to do a 9 to 5 job and earn a ton of money so that you can just go screw off on the weekend and have a really good time? Like it doesn't matter the what, but you want to set that. If you have family, you want to do it with your family so you're going in the same direction. And then it backs down. So you start with big goals and then it backs down to choosing no more than 3 do or die things every day that is moving you towards that vision. And sometimes it's just one thing. Sometimes you're like, literally, what I need to do is go to my job and do such a good job that I get a $50,000 bonus because this presentation is so good.
Yeah.
And I would call that my 1-3 thing. But the book's all about that method because that's how I have gone from um, living a life that felt like it was being lived for me to living the life I choose and building Holler Roast Coffee and having this wonderful community around me of people who I can trade with them. One of the ways, the other thing I wanted to say, Rebecca, is another thing you can do is find ways to barter and do other things to avoid the need to earn 30% more money to pay
Mhm.
for a thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, because if you're spending your income that's already been taxed and then you're going to buy something and then there's a sales tax and,
Yeah, and
an
then it's
endless
their income and
cycle.
then they're taxed, like, it's very inefficient.
So, yeah, talk about that. So, how does that work? Because you have this unintentional community. So, it's essentially a neighborhood. And whenever properties come up for sale, people that you know who are looking to move, you might say, "Hey, there's a house for sale. Come
Or
join
rent.
our neighborhood," basically, right? And you're kind of like buying up the whole block, and then you guys can barter. And that's part of the book too, is talking about invest in yourself, then invest in like your network or your community. Is that this number two?
Yeah, I mean, it does talk about building that. I use stories from people who have used the method and stories from me using the method. The first time I used the method, I was in my 20s, and the life I wanted was one with lots of travel, and I
Hmm.
got it within 5 years, and I hated every minute of it.
Yeah.
So I had to do it again.
Well, but you actually wanted, you found out.
That's okay. That's okay. Like, you're like, okay, well, it works. But I like to be home now that I have a partner in my life, right? So, it's the community here. The way this went down is because I started the podcast, I resonated with people who wanted to also build freedom into their lives. And I do a lot of homesteading topics on living free in Tennessee. And we started getting together and doing meetups. And then a core group of us became really good friends. We call ourselves the Tennessee GSD Crew. Can I swear on your channel? Because I don't know.
Yes, yes,
Okay, it stands
absolutely.
for get shit done. I didn't want that. So it's the get shit done crew because we're all doers. We're all passionate about building. And so when we get together to hang out and have a beer by the fire or whatever, we don't want to just sit by the fire having a beer. We want to do something. So we've built composting outhouses. We put in a solar array here. We put in a solar water heater here. We go to each other's houses and we kind of perma blitz
Yep.
that. And because of that, I got to know people and people saw us doing that. And I was talking about it on the podcast, and people moved here from other states,
Mm.
which is like both scary and a huge honor because they want to be part of what's going on here. And what I did here in the Holler neighborhood, because my homestead's called the Holler Homestead, so we call ourselves the Holler neighbors, is every time something came up for rent or sale, if somebody who had been who'd been around for a while, so we vetted it by getting to know each other, I'd say, like, hey, this place is for rent. And then they'd come in and we had some hardships happen. And we had to work together through hardships. I mean, actually 2020's shutdowns and all that noise. Um, that actually for us was a really good time for codifying how we work as neighbors and
Yeah.
growing too, because the shortages came and we're like, well, we already grow food, but we need to be, it was always just sort of I get some chickens every year or whatever. And I'm like, no, we need meat here. and so now we have a flock of sheep and we manage it together. And
Nice.
Tactical does most of that. But, every time there's a combined effort, we call in the neighbors to help. And we went through a time where we had pigs and then decided not to have pigs. I got much more just methodical about the garden. And what that means is that I basically don't have a grocery bill anymore.
Wow.
So this is all
That's
coming back
amazing.
to if you reduce your expenses. Now, I do have expenses on the homestead, so I kind of consider those my grocery bill. But and you know this because you get whole cows, right?
Yep.
I buy a whole cow because we don't raise cattle here. My property is not that big. It's 3.2 acres, and we borrow a 10 acre, 16. It's a 16 acre property where we run the sheep next door. So, cattle are not in my future unless I get a lot more land. So I buy a cow every year, and this year it was $3.50 a pound by the time I was
What?
done. Yeah, $3.50.
Wow.
Now, ground beef, 20% cheapest ground beef you can get at Aldi right now in Tennessee is $3.99 a pound.
Yeah, and this you're talking about, I'm sure, is
Yeah,
like
this is like
grass
steaks,
fed.
roasts,
Yeah,
everything. Yeah.
someone you trust, that cow had a happy life, and it's like,
Organic, grass-fed, premium beef. Yeah.
yeah, and that is a good point too, because so our cattle rancher, he actually lives like a block away from where our homestead is, which is so funny. So he stopped by. We did an order. We split it 3 ways with 2 of our other buddies, and we still to this day, I'll go in the deep freeze, open it up, and I'm like, oh, I guess we're having chuck roast tonight. Like
Oh,
that was
that's
the one
us
that was
tomorrow,
easiest to
actually.
grab.
Yeah.
Of course, we go through all the steak first. That's another story. But yeah, and it's a great price. You know the quality and who you're buying it from. And it's like, actually, so John and I did go out to lunch today at a local barbecue place, but we were looking at the prices on menus. I don't know if this is how it is in Tennessee, but it's really crazy right now. Like you could get lunch for like, I don't know, 10 or 12 bucks here in Bastrop, Texas, when I first moved out here in 2021. We just went out and it's like $17 for a plate. And I know $5 doesn't seem like a lot, but now we're talking almost $20 a person for a lunch, by the time you get your drink. And it's like, you could just have a nice steak if you buy the cow in bulk or whatever. Like if you're buying an order in bulk and splitting it with friends and storing it in your deep freeze, is like, you actually are going to get a more nutritious meal, because the plate that they gave us was like 2 sides, and then you get a tiny, tiny little bit of your like sausage cut up, and then a tiny, tiny little bit of brisket or whatever. It's like, it just kind of makes sense to do at this point with all the inflation and all the prices and everything, to buy things in bulk and to, the source, prepare it yourself, the oils everything was cooked in, and you can trust that it's not going to have a bunch of creepy GMO or mRNA things pumped into it or whatever. Who knows what you're eating when you eat out nowadays. But yeah, that's a good point too, that you were able to do that with your neighbors. Like, doesn't make sense to have a bunch of cows on your property, because they like to have a lot of land and they like to have friends. I mean, we looked into getting cows on our 10-acre homestead, and it's like, you really can't even do that, because that's not even enough land. If you were going to have 3 of them and they're grass fed, then you have to supplement with like grain or whatever else, and that defeats the whole purpose, right? Or get a big thing of hay. And so it's like, no, they need a lot of land. And so maybe your friend can focus on, you have a trusted supplier friend for that, for beef for your neighborhood or whatever, but then you guys can focus more on gardening, like you said, and like really get good at that, and like focusing on bartering. How did you learn how to garden? Like what courses did you take? Like I know we've talked about Joel Salatin being an influence in biodynamic farming, but like for you, how did you get so good at all of this? Because it's hard. At least growing food in Texas
It is
is
hard. I wish I would have taken a course. That would have been really smart. So courses were not easy to come by when I was learning to garden. And I had always had, some tomatoes or whatnot when I lived in Oregon before I moved to Tennessee. But here I just came out and started planting stuff, and some stuff died and some didn't. And I got to know local farmers, and I was really lucky to get to know somebody who did no-till methods. And there are some plant communities around here that are all about regenerative agriculture. So I just fell into permaculture. And then I started designing what I called modern homesteading, which was based on some basic principles of how you organize your homestead and you function stack and all this stuff. And then I heard a Jack Spirko podcast talking about permaculture and realized somebody way smarter than me had spent a lot more time putting together the idea of permaculture and that I didn't have to do the work anymore. So I started just learning about permaculture. So most of what I've done is self-taught through killing a lot of plants.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
livestock was like every farmer I could talk to, and then everything I could learn about the livestock as I was raising them, which meant that we had some issues, but I'm really good at troubleshooting chicken diseases as a result of that.
Mm.
And I had a book called The Encyclopedia of Country Living, written by Carla Emery, which is a really great resource that if you're starting out on a homestead, because she talks about everything in there. But it wasn't until probably the last 5 years that I started realizing there were classes I could go to, right? So I've now started, I make it a point to not just, I've started attending events again.
Yeah.
Like I took a cheese making class. So once or twice a
Ooh.
year, it's not a bunch, because usually I'm at events because people want me to speak. But I've started going to a couple events a year where I'm not speaking so that I can learn the stuff from those events. Like I was actually going as an attendee, but they asked me to speak because they had a cancellation. I'm going to the Kentucky Sustainable Living Expo.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and I'm giving a presentation I've already given somewhere else, so it's actually not a huge preparation time for that one. And I can't wait to hear what the speakers have to say there. Like, I love going to Exit and Build Land Summit because there's always somebody talking about something that I hadn't thought about before, you know. So that's as I said, I haven't taken anything in particular. I am taking Spirko's courses that he's putting out now too.
Yeah, he did a good biochar workshop
Yeah,
last year at the Land
I got that
Summit.
one.
And then
Yeah.
I really liked your course because there was a time where I don't know, it was a year or two ago that you did a canning workshop with us
Yeah.
through Live Free Academy. And it was like a lot of cattle ranchers had to send their cows to the slaughterhouse. It was really
Yeah.
sad because there's a horrible drought. And you were like, hey, you know what? This is the best time to go buy the grass-fed beef, and then you can learn how to do canning. And people are like, you can can beef? It's like, you can can anything. But that course was really well received. Yeah,
Yeah.
these skills that it almost seems like have been lost, you
They
know?
are.
It's like, what the heck are we going to do if Shizzle does hit the fizzle? Like, we
Yeah.
should probably learn these basic skill sets like sourdough bread making and soap making and candle making, these things that, like, you know, was common knowledge, what, like a century ago. And now everyone's just buying everything from Walmart, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I did a power pantry method with you guys too that did
Oh,
pretty well. I don't
yeah.
know how well
Yeah.
received it was, but I'm redoing the content on that a little bit with some more additions. And it was like I did the canning one and then we did the power pantry one. And last night I took the last 4 jars of beef I canned in the canning webinar that I did for y'all and made it into stew because I had put my chicken in the oven for dinner and walked away, and I came out and the oven was off and the breaker had blown. And so I'm like,
Ooh.
oh crap. So then I started it again and I came out and the oven never got hot again and my oven broke. And so I had this like 100-degree chicken thing that I sent next door to a neighbor and said, finish cooking that, but it's also like 7 o'clock. And so it was a really fast stew that I could make just by dumping jars of stuff I'd canned, putting a few
Nice.
spices in there, and we had a beef stew. And it was fine because when you live 25 minutes from town, it's not worth driving 25
Yeah.
minutes waiting for your food. Like all of that is like, I can make a stew in 25 minutes, you know, so we'll just
Might
do
as well
that.
do it at home.
No, I was really thankful for that beef canning course, as a matter of fact, last night, because I don't can a lot of my beef. I keep it in the freezer first, but I'm prepared if electricity were to be out for like a week or two.
Yep.
I would then start canning the beef. And it's so easy to do. And it's such a I think the loss of the heritage skills is sad. Like, I just took an animal trapping class. I have no reason to trap animals, but I wanted to learn how to do it because one of the most frustrating things about raising chickens my first year was the raccoon problem, where
Mhm.
they could get into amazingly small holes into
Oh,
your coop to get your chickens. And my raccoon population is controlled by the dogs I have who go outside now. So we don't have a raccoon problem, but I thought, I would like to learn how to do animal trapping in case I ever have to get a raccoon again, because it took me 9 months to catch that bugger in a live
wow.
trap. And so I learned just more about how to figure out where to put traps and all different kinds of traps you can use, and like different traps for different animals. It was super interesting. And I just thought, we're losing these, like basic skills that pioneers used on a daily basis to survive.
Yeah, and that's something that I thought the Self Reliance Festival really does well, is like having speakers go over these really important skills, like even first aid. Like I remember we were there, I think it was the one in the fall a few years ago, where there was a speaker who was, I think, a nurse, or he like has experience working in ambulances or something like that. But he was like, hey, guess what? If someone has a heart attack right now, raise your hand if you know like raise your hand if you know what to do. Someone cuts their arm and they're needing, to be stitched up a little bit. Like these are really important skills, because if there is an emergency, like even having basic knowledge of CPR or the Heimlich maneuver or whatever, like this all is really important. But the Self Reliance Festival also happens in the spring, so that's coming up in March, right? Or is it March?
It's
Oh my
April
gosh.
6th and 7th. It's usually March, but Easter
Okay.
happened. So we decided not to have the
Oh, I
Self Reliance
see.
Festival on Easter. So yeah, it's a week later this year.
I said it's happening in March, and then I realized it is March. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, this year's going by so fast. But okay, so talk to us about the Self Reliance Festival. So obviously, everyone knows we have the Exit and Build Land Summit coming up. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the Self Reliance Festival is in Tennessee. So if you're in that neck of the woods, maybe you can share when it's happening, what is going down, and what people can expect at that event.
So everybody who complains that they don't meet people who are like them, the way you meet people who are like you is you get out to things like Exit and Build or Self Reliance Festival or whatever thing of that nature is near you. The Self Reliance Festival was started to bridge the gap between homesteaders and the guys who are into tactical prepping, because I'm
Mm,
friends with John Willis at Special Operations Equipment, and he had more of the tactical network, but he's been really into homesteading and permaculture the last 5 or 6 years. And he said we had a gathering, and all people wanted to do was see what he was doing with his animals. And so we started the Self Reliance Festival to focus on solutions and building what you can and doing what you can, rather than being afraid of the news cycle, because the news cycle is going to cycle, and some of that stuff is genuinely scary, and we could talk about that. But at the end of the day, are you going to stop the World Economic Forum by yourself? No, but can you make yourself like way more World Economic Forum proof by growing your own food or taking steps to learn how to work together as a community so that they are completely obsolete? Yes. And so Self Reliance Festival focuses on that. It's April 6th and 7th, selfreliancefestival.com if you're interested in coming. The thing we work really hard on at this festival is to connect people. So we have speakers. Angry American, the famous author who writes dystopian fiction, is going to be there. I've got a guy named Sunny Puzika who's doing a self-defense class for women.
mm.
That's going to be a pretty good one. I wish I wasn't coordinating the festival so I could take that class. I've got do you know what is his name? His name's escaping me right now. Dang it, he's really cool. Anyway, it will come to me in a second, but I've got a famous permaculture dude talking about permaculturizing your kitchen. So how self-reliant is
Ooh.
your kitchen, and do you have systems in place to like process your herbs that you're growing, so that that, like, I'm garlic independent. I like literally it
Yeah.
would take a catastrophic drought for multiple years for me not to have garlic, right?
Which is medicinal also, so
Which
that's
is
good to have on
medicinal
hand.
also, and that, I mean, that goes back, and then we do medical stuff, and that is super important. His name is Alan Booker. I don't know why Alan's
Mm.
name just like fled my brain about it. So it's Alan Booker. Anyway, so he's talking about 5 areas in your kitchen that you can assess when you go home to see how self-reliant it is, and then work from there. And so we really try to have a vast number of things that focus on mindset. But I do connection sessions where we have people say like, okay, raise your hand if you're like, you kind of feel alone wherever you live in the country. And somebody will raise their hand and I'll say, where do you live? And they'll say something like Hawaii. And I'll say, who else is here from Hawaii? And other hands go up. And then we say, okay, you guys go over there and meet right now and exchange information. So we've sort of taken this extra step. We used to just have people look at each other, but then they forgot who each other was. So now we have them walk off and connect. And as a result of this, we've had, I think 20 or 30 families either move to or connect in Kansas as part of the Midwest Preparedness
Yeah.
Project. And a bunch of different people, like people have found out that they are at the same event with somebody who lives within 10 miles of them.
Yes.
And so, you know, I'm an introvert. I know what it feels like to have anxiety about going to these events and you don't know anybody and all of that. And I get around that a little bit by just going anyway. And when I do that, what I find is that I meet people who are easy to be around. So the other thing is, yes, it's scary to go to an event that you don't know anybody, but it's worth the investment. It's worth the time investment. It's worth the money investment. If you can just come out of there with 2 good relationships. And what you'll find when you have sort of a shared passion is that it's easier to be around the people that are at that event than when you're at sort of more like the corporate events that they make you go to.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And if you're feeling anxious, you could always, start the day with some hollow roast coffee, get the energy going, and then drink some Brave Botanicals Kratom to take the edge off.
Why no? Right. Yeah.
Shameless self-plug for anxiety relief. But yeah, because when we were at Self Reliance, we had our Kratom booth and everyone's like, what the heck is that? But there's a lot of good vendors, a lot of great presentations. And yeah, like we were saying, it's important to just go meet people because it's like shocking how many times you'll like be networking and find, oh my gosh, you're like living literally within like 10 miles or like super close to me. Then that can become, your buddy for perma blitzes or doing like work parties and events. And it's always more fun to do things with a crew and with others. So yeah, that's awesome that you're doing that. So that's April 6th and 7th, the Self Reliance Festival. And there's a lot of good information, at these events just beyond the networking. So always important to keep learning, to put yourself out there. And there's a lot of turmoil this year. So I feel like this topic is the most important thing to focus on at this time.
What do you think about this year, Rebecca? Is it like kind of freaking you out a little bit?
Like you said, I mean, I think it's important to not like allow fear to really overwhelm because it is scary what's happening like with the election year and with Trump and Biden and both of these, clashing viewpoints for normies, I guess, if you will, having talks like I just listen to NPR for fun. Don't judge me. I like to listen to it just to understand what the mainstream like conversation is. So I like listen to it sometimes on my way into work. And today they were saying that Trump is like Hitler. And I'm like, oh my God, on NPR, they're literally saying that a presidential candidate is like Hitler. Like there is so much division and so much polarization. And then on NPR, they're like, but there was a recent Gallup poll saying that Biden has a 38% approval rating. So it's like, so what are you presenting to people like in terms of hope? Like what is getting communicated? And I feel like for folks who think that it's just the 2-party system, it's very defeating right now, which is why it's so important, I feel like, to shift focus away from viewing the political system as a way to vote for someone to rule over us to like solve all of our problems, but just to take our sovereignty back and realize we have to solve our own problems and we have to find others to help solve problems with us. So I'm not feeling super scared about things this year. I'm just feeling like a sense of urgency personally in terms of preparedness and finding people who I have like good relationships with, like, for instance, the KNC cattle ranchers. And, if we need a source for beef that's grass fed and people that we trust and we can buy with Bitcoin or barter or whatever. And like last week, for the first time, and I'm embarrassed to even admit this, but I went to the Bastrop Farmers Market for the first time that I've lived here, which I've almost lived here for 3 years, on Saturday, like less than a week ago. And it's like, why? Why was I not going sooner? But, it's because in our Freedom Cell network here in Central Texas, I've been able to establish relationships with people who aren't even at the farmers market, who are just smaller scale, folks, like our friend Darren, who has Freedom Farms, and he will sell like half a pig if you want to. He'll be like, hey, I have 8 getting slaughtered on Friday. Who wants to put in an order? Or like our friend at Amber Oaks, John Pantalone. So these local food producers. But either way, I feel like, it's easy to look at what's happening this year and say, wow, we're going to have a civil war. This is crazy. There's so much chaos. The currency is getting destabilized. And what the heck's happening with Bitcoin? Now it's almost $70,000 worth, like the highest value it's ever been in, like historically. It's like, what the hell is happening? But yeah, I mean, like being aware of all that is good, but I personally am trying to just like focus on getting food production going on our homestead. Like we're looking to find a new community member. Like we're just trying. I personally also, I shouldn't say we, but to speak for my whole community out at Radical Roots Ranch, but I personally am just trying to like focus on exit and build strategy, get our event off the ground, bring people together, form more coalitions and partnerships, and kind of like, yeah, focus on that. Because we also have someone there speaking at the Land Summit, and I know this is happening the same weekend as your Self Reliance Festival, but I was not aware of this, but there's been all these eclipses since 2017, and there's like this whole research on like, what does this mean? Why are there so many eclipses happening? And it's like, actually the best place to view the eclipse is in Central Texas. Like, so I'm going to be going to Confluence that weekend to see this happen, because it's supposed to be the last one. And there was actually just another one a few months ago in October. And like, what is this symbolizing? Like, what does this mean? And, is it a message? Is it the book of Revelations? Like, what's happening? I don't know. I'm like going off on a tangent.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I've had people tell me they think that it's the end of the world. And I'm like, well, where would you rather be at the end of the world? But then with all your self-reliance buddies at Self Reliance Festival.
Yeah.
But actually you might need to reread that book if you're like, because that's the other thing. It's like you can't know.
Yeah. So at the Land Summit, our friend Kurt, who is with Texas Ready, they sell heirloom seeds. He actually was doing a call with Ryan and I a few weeks ago, and we were talking about what he and Lucinda will be discussing for their main stage talk at the Exit and Build Land Summit. And he said, well, we really want to talk about how our gardening events are bringing together people across multiple different religions, and how we've built a coalition with the Muslim community and this and this. He said, but I want to do a workshop on the eclipses. He's like, because there's been some really interesting, he's like, in the book of Revelations or in the Bible, like there's different references of how like what's happening in the sky and the stars can be some sort of, message. And it's not like the end of the world is coming when the eclipse happens, but just something is shifting like in our human consciousness and in our awareness and like reconnection with the land, and like this urgent need to like change and like do something dramatically different. And maybe even you could argue the pandemic really shifted a lot of that too, right? Because it kind of shut the world down and everything changed after that. So he's going to do a workshop I'm excited about. John was kind of like, what the heck? What does this have to do with Exit and Build? But it does, because it's kind of cool the way that all of it ties in. And so I'll be posting information about that workshop on the website soon. But you're going to be speaking at the Land Summit as well. And it's your 3 topics. I saw your talk title. So that's kind of like what your book is about, right? So do you care to share what folks can expect to see during your presentation?
So it's kind of funny because my first speech at the first Exit and Build Land Summit was about the holler neighbors, because we're building this really cool community here. And ever since then, I've been more of a motivational speaker or helping people attack mindset problems.
Yeah.
So when John and I were talking about it, I'm like, well, I can do a lot of different things, but I have this book coming out, and it's about this life strategic planning method. And I think we can talk about how to opt out of the system, basically, by using uh, a life planning method, which I use my three things. And I will say this, you don't have to use my method. You can use any method. If you are setting a purpose and a strategy and goals, and working to get alignment with the people that you are living life with, that's in essence what you need to do. But we're going to talk about some stories about that. And we're also going to talk about how you can take tangible steps every day to eat one bite of the elephant to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Because if you don't take a step every day, or every day that you can, then you're going backwards. And if you want to get land, and it feels inaccessible to you right now because real estate prices are through the roof. Like I hear these stories every day.
Yep.
Like, you're so lucky, Nicole, you got your homestead for cheap. Well, at the time I got my homestead for cheap, I also was earning like $20,000 a year. So it was, not the easiest time to get it, but I was also lucky enough that I was able to get this property. And then once you get a property, you can start using its resources to pay for things. I have another friend who he scraped together $11,000 through some maybe not so great credit practices and money that he had, and bought an acre.
Wow. That's a great
And
price for an
it was
acre.
like 5 or 6 years ago, and it had like a former meth house trailer house on it, and another trailer house that the city told him, as part of buying this, you need to take that out of here. So he spent his first year tearing down that other one, and
Mhm.
had not enough money to bring a dumpster in. So like getting small enough pieces that he could cram them in his car.
Oh gosh.
Right.
Hey, whatever
And
you gotta do to make it happen,
And
right?
to keep his costs down, he grew food. He figured out how to get water going, like this whole thing. And he said, I basically was successful out of desperation because I couldn't, like, 2020, it was 2019 that he got the place. 2020, he was a musician. Everything shut down. He had no income all of a sudden. So
Yeah.
he was
No
living somewhere
shows.
else, working on the property. He had to move to the property. And then he was just like, you know how it is. You grow a garden, you have extra, you sell it.
Yep.
And then he figured out how to make rain barrels and started selling those. And he tells us, like, he runs a nursery now, and
Wow.
he's since gotten married, and he built a tiny house basically for him and his wife. And he rents out that property now. No, he sold that property and bought another property is what happened. But so the answer is that for him, he scraped and scrimped and figured out how to get something that was not ideal. And he used what that was to make it work, to leverage that into something else. And those are the solutions that we can build for ourselves.
Yeah, and I think too, it's like if you have to start scrappy, start scrappy. Like just do whatever you need to do to like get to the land. Like I just bought an RV. Like I didn't necessarily want to live in a travel trailer, but I was like, I'm just gonna do it. Whatever I would have paid in my apartment for a year was what I set my budget as. And I went and got an RV loan, and I moved. I found an RV that I liked within a week and moved it to my friend's property and ended up living there for basically 3 years. And it was like, wow, I lived for the price that I would have spent in 1 year in rent. I got to stretch that for 3 years. I paid her a modest fee to have my RV parked there and got to learn firsthand about permaculture and intentional community. And it was a great first experience. But yeah, it's like your friend there too. He was able to build the tiny home and just you step by step, you get things going. And
Yeah.
it's like, you kind of have to swim with the sharks at first to like, if you are wanting to do this and maybe don't have the funds yet, just go sign up for woofing or the
Yeah.
worldwide organic farming, or go.
Hey, a woofer who has skills may end up being a farmhand, may end up getting a piece of land on somebody's project. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like Paul Wheaton said, the skip program, like there's all these farm landowners who don't have anyone to will their land to, and they want to keep the legacy going. And so they're like, please, do you have skills? Like, let's do this. Keep the farm going. Don't have developers buy it and create some other cookie cutter neighborhood, or have the government buy it or whatever, like a lot of farmland's getting gobbled up, and it's interesting right now. So yeah, I'm excited for your talk at the Exit and Build Land Summit. We do have on that topic though of like figuring out whatever solution to make it happen. David Holmgren's talk will be about that too. Of like, hey, can you exit and build in the normal suburbs? Like, can you exit and build in a normal house? And like, just where do you start? Like, can you retrofit existing house to make it off grid? Like, what are the options? Can you join a community that already exists and not even need that big upfront, down payment, whether it's $11,000 or, more? Like, there's ways to start homesteading without breaking the bank. So that's kind of the point. But
yeah, homestead where you are needs to be a thing.
Yes, exactly. I remember your talk at the first Land Summit was like so just like eye-opening for me, because you started it off by saying, everyone say no. Practice it with me. No. Because for a lot of people, like I can say this from personal experience too, are people pleasers. And it's like, you're never going to get what you want if you are always saying yes to everyone else for what they want. So it's like saying no to things that aren't serving you. Like, no, this isn't how I'm going to do things anymore. No, no, no. And like, what is it that I want? Like you were saying with strategic planning, writing out, what do you want in 10 years? What do you want in 5 years? What do you want in 1 year? And like, okay, now what do you need to do to get there? And anything else that's not serving that purpose needs to be a no for now, maybe. But
yeah. And if something isn't ideal for your 10-year plan, but it's a step in the right direction, that may get you there. I mean, I had no idea I'd be a coffee roaster if you would have asked me that. Like, I was roasting coffee 10 years ago, but I didn't. I mean, like, that was not in the plan.
Yeah, selling black tooth powder was not in my plan, but somehow I spent 5 years of my life doing that. So how did we get here?
Yeah, and you learned so much while you were doing it, right?
I had a really good time doing it, actually, because I learned about entrepreneurship. I learned about the farmers market movement, because it is a movement. It's like taking back what we have control over, and we have the ability to trade with one another and have peace through commerce. And like, I feel like focusing on that and seeing when you are like in the farmers market movement, it's just like, wow, I don't know, it's empowering. Like, we can do this. We don't need like food getting on shipping containers from different countries. It just doesn't make sense. Like, what in the sprayed with all these chemicals, we're eating poison. It's just dumb. Like, what? And then it's all wrapped in like plastic. Like, oh, but you can't have a plastic bag when you check out, but everything else can be wrapped in plastic. And none of it is just all so backwards. It's so weird. But like, until, you step into finding those alternatives and like bartering or trading or whatever, it's like, what is this? Like, how do you become this solution? It's like, well, voting with your dollar, and that also is how are you earning a living? And is it in line with your, sparking joy? And like, I think entrepreneurship, kind of how we started this thing off, is definitely the solution, and having that financial sovereignty is super important. But
yeah.
Well, it's been great chatting. We have actually a nice amount of people on the live stream. So if you have a minute, if anyone has questions, we had a few comments here. The Tommy Farm. I love Carla Emery. My copy is well worn and a universe of every practical homesteading know-how. Rest in peace. And this was because you referred the book. It was the Encyclopedia of Country Living, right?
Yeah, and you have to search Carla Emery, because there is now another Encyclopedia of Country Living out there that is not that book, that is not as good.
All right.
And she has
knowledge here.
Yeah.
And then, someone else agreed with you earlier, saying Starbucks is awful. So way to see a problem and create a solution and now make a living doing it. And then, in fear is no way to live. And someone else had a comment about raccoons. This guy actually almost got attacked by a raccoon like 2 months ago. It was really scary. So maybe
raccoons can be like thuggish.
Vicious.
They're like
some real farm dogs.
Yeah.
But so I don't see any other questions. Do you have any closing thoughts? I know we've been kind of rambling on for a while, but it's been really a pleasure speaking with you, Nicole. Any other closing thoughts? Anything to share?
Well, just this. You are what you surround yourself with. And so just by watching things like this, you are starting, you're doing what you need to do to keep your mindset for freedom. That's like the first step. But I think that we can all invest in ourselves and in the community around us and be the counter economy. I think, we always talk about building the counter economy. We already are the counter economy. The next step is we do business with each other, we support each other, and we move forward. And that's already starting to happen in a lot of circles all over the place. So when I see things like Scary out there
Mhm.
crumbling, I just remember, like, I needed to print stickers for somebody as a marketing piece. And instead of going to like random faceless
Yep.
Staples, I happen to know the Homestead twins print stickers. So I gave them more money than I would give
Yep.
Staples to print those stickers. But what happens when I invest in the community is that their business does well, my business does well, and we have each other. And that is something that we've sort of walked away from. So don't be scared to put out there what you're doing. Don't be scared to start. No entrepreneur ever was successful who didn't start. They never became an entrepreneur if they didn't start. So do something. It may not be the thing you do long term, but do something.
Amen. Yeah, exactly. That's like the whole thing is like just begin, just start. It's like you
It won't
can
be perfect and nobody cares.
yeah, exactly. And like you can always formulate ways that could go wrong and like come up with all these reasons not to do it, but it's like just act. Be like Nike, just do it. But don't buy your shoes from Nike. Buy them from a local shoemaker. Okay, cool. Anyway, on that note, I'm starting to get a little my brain is frazzled after this week. We've had an interesting week here at Live Free Academy preparing for the land summit, but
Yeah, well, the land summit's coming, man. I can't wait to meet everybody there.
yeah, it's an interesting lineup this year, I will say. And we're really going to focus too on spirituality and like urgency of like reconnecting with the land and like reconnecting with one another and supporting like your tribe, your people, like, and if you can buy from a friend, like just really focusing and honing in on like what will it take on a daily decision making level to like start shifting in this new direction. And I feel like a lot of us are already on that path, but it definitely helps when you find your tribe and find other folks to connect with. And that's really what the Exit and Build Land Summit is all about, building that network. And so we're so just glad and appreciative, Nicole, that you've been part of the Exit and Build movement from day one all the way from the beginning. And it's so nice to have you and folks like Jack Spearco and Derek Bros even coming back every year as our I guess representatives and flagship folks of beacons of hope. Like you're doing it, you're living this lifestyle, like, and it's just refreshing to see it done in style. And like the fact that you're an entrepreneur but also able to do your activism at the same time, like that is just so powerful and awesome, and I commend you for that. So thank you for all your
Thanks.
great work in the
Well,
world.
I can't wait to see you again and maybe share some kratom. I'm not drinking as much
Yeah.
alcohol as I used to. So
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, I was almost 4 years free, no alcohol. I almost made it 4 years, and like
yeah.
2 weeks before my 4-year anniversary, we were in Mexico, and the guy for the Greater Reset and the server came out with these tequila boots, like,
Yeah.
hey, drink some tequila. And we just all looked at each other and it was like, okay, tequila. Hey, every now and again, not a big deal. But yeah, that's another thing too, is like alcohol can be very numbing and very distracting and like just taking you away from, tapping into your highest purpose, because it really like lowers your vibration. So we will have a concert at the Land Summit and there will be booze, but we will also have a coffee bar, a kratom bar, and of course we'll be serving hollow roast. We got to sort out all the details. I'm actually talking to a local company that does cacao, thinking,
Mhm.
hey, that could be a
Ooh,
cool way to do like a cacao ceremony or something like that. But
cacao is delicious. And
yeah.
the company that Rebecca is with is Live Free Academy. I think that's coming through on my channel there.
Oh, nice.
Live
Yes,
Free
yes.
Academy
That
and
is what it's called. And let me put it here to
yeah.
exit. And Nicole, I'm sure you'll get your link to post, because right now everything is just so new, but we're still kind of getting all the details. I was trying to type it in here
Yeah.
But it's the Exit and Build Land Summit.
Yes.
So for
It's
folks
a
who
fun
want,
event in Bastrop. Self Reliance Festival is in Camden. Um, different but similar reasons that we do it, I guess, is probably the best way to explain that.
yeah, definitely. And I think no matter what you're doing this year, just for folks like who are wanting to learn about homesteading or who may be doing it already, who already have land, just like let's all band together, let's stay connected. And I think it's great to have you on the show, Nicole. I'm really glad that you do your show, and I'm really glad that you put on Self Reliance Festival. And for folks who are wanting to check out the Exit and Build Land Summit, we also live stream it. So if you can't come in person, you can always check out the live stream. But Nicole's talk will be Saturday morning, so that'll be great to have you kick off that day. And we'll have a panel as well about cash flowing on the property and how to make income doing homesteading, because that's like a huge setback for a lot of folks, is trying to make sense of it financially. So we're excited to have that panel, and hopefully you'll be able to join on that as well. We have some folks coming in who actually, like you were saying, your friend that started a nursery and like just making businesses on the land and ways to have that financial freedom. So it's a beautiful thing. Well, thank you, Nicole, for joining.
No, thanks for having me on. This was a great talk.
I'm excited for your book to launch at the Exit and Build Land Summit. So it's May 17th through the 19th. So you can share more about your book then. And for folks who are wanting to keep in touch, you have your website is livingfreeintennessee.com, right?
Yes.
Yep. And then for folks who want to keep in touch with me, it's Live Free with Rebecca Bush. And the company that oversees and puts on the Exit and Build Land Summit is called Live Free Academy. And we do all sorts of stuff. So homesteading is one of them, but also Bitcoin and all sorts of other topics, health, you name it. But
yeah, right now would be a good time to take a Bitcoin class at Live Free Academy.
Oh my gosh, yes, actually, John is doing a webinar this Saturday because Bitcoin is exploding right now, and so many people are like, "What do I do?" So it's actually free, and he did it on a weekend, so more people can attend. He's just been working every weekend. This year has been so crazy, but I think it's really good that people get the information they need about Bitcoin, because there's a lot of talk right now, and it's like, who do you listen to, and like, well, what do I do, how do I buy it, what's the best way to buy it, how do I make sure that it's not going to get hacked into, and all of this. So anyway,
John is a really good teacher on that too, guys. So if you're wondering that, like, go to Live Free Academy, sign up for that free webinar on Saturday. John will try to upsell you on something as part of that. And that's
John's
why we
always
like John.
doing that, isn't he?
But you will learn, you will know how to secure your Bitcoin. You'll know what to do with it. And that's super important. If you're going to buy it, you want to know how to secure it.
Yep. And he always does like these free webinars just to give a taste for helping folks get their like toes wet, if you will. Their Bitcoin and some of these topics are so intricate, though. You really do need like a longer workshop or masterclass or something like that to fully understand like how to set up a wallet. So it's good to learn about cryptocurrency as well, like what to do, what not to do. But yeah, that's a whole other a whole other ball game.
Whole other show.
Yes. But thank you so much, Nicole, for being on the show. So I'm going to do a little outro here, and awesome. So that was episode 15 of Live Free with Rebecca Bush. So glad that Nicole Sauce was able to join for this episode, because we are always doing cool partnerships. And as we had discussed, she has her Self Reliance Festival coming up April 6th, April 7th. So be sure to check that out. I personally, and John and I, will be at the Confluence event, which is happening in Bandera, Texas, which happens to be one of the best places to watch the eclipse. So we'll be there that weekend, putting on an Exit and Build workshop, but I'll be there in spirit for the Self Reliance Festival. And it's like really good information if you're in Tennessee. So, make sure to check that out. And of course, we have the Exit and Build Land Summit coming up May 17th, 18th, and 19th. We're going to be live streaming it for free the first day and a half. And then we do have a virtual ticket where you can purchase, because we're putting on a community matchmaking, which, we hire someone to help us do that professionally. And it's like super efficient. And then, of course, we're going to have epic workshops on Sunday as well. So there will be a virtual ticket for free. Then if you want to do the one that's a deeper deeper dive. That's not on the website yet, but it will be soon, because right now on the website, we're focusing on in-person tickets. So we're almost sold out of our VIP tickets. There's only a few left. We do have in-person general admission tickets on special early bird discount until Friday. So if you are wanting to come, you already know you're planning to come, go ahead and check out the exitandbuildlandsummit.com website, and you can get your ticket at a discount because the early bird pricing will end March 8th, which is Friday. So thank you all so much for watching. Really appreciate you all. If you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, you can check out all of my dorky tiny home tours with this guy. We walk around, I think, like almost 100 different tiny homes on my channel. I've got tons of videos, but also I have 14 other podcast episodes on topics of living free. And I always interview badass women. So you'll notice that if you do the backlog and see other episodes. So hope that you found this episode inspiring. We are going to have next week another podcast. And so I'm planning to feature Tower Garden, which is an innovative way to grow food vertically. We also have an upcoming episode here in the next few weeks with Texas Ready. So Lucinda Bailey will be joining to discuss, of course, it's March planting season. Everyone's excited about gardening. So that's what I'll be focusing on for the next few weeks to come. And if you want to keep in touch, I primarily use Telegram. So I have my channel Live Free with Rebecca Bush on Telegram, and I'd use Instagram and Facebook and that kind of stuff too. So you can find me there, Live Free with Rebecca Bush. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to subscribe to the channel, I hope we'll keep in touch, and would love to see you in person at the Exit and Build Land Summit coming up May 17th through the 19th. We're also doing optional immersive farm tours the day before and the day after, which is, I think, the best part is like seeing farms and intentional communities in person. It's really cool to see what other properties have built out and developed, and very informative and inspiring as well. So have a great rest of your day, and thank you all so much for watching. And I did mention Kratom earlier, but I didn't put any information. So this, let me just do this. It's free ounce of kratom.com, just because we talked about it earlier. So if you're struggling with pain, if you are struggling with anxiety, if you just want a pep in your step and a little extra energy, there's various strains. This one that I'm enjoying right now is a white strain, which is good for mental clarity and focus. And I actually just mix mine with matcha. I like the combo personally. But anyway, it's a beverage. It's like a powderized leaf that is really nice for mental clarity, pain relief. If you have any anxiety or any issues like that, it's nice alternative, so you don't have to use pharmaceuticals. Like, it can help me get off of Adderall. It helped me stop drinking alcohol. But some people even use it to get off, like the red varieties, to get off of things like opiates and stuff like that. So it has some benefits to help, get off of pharmaceuticals. But also, if you're not on pharmaceuticals and you're just like, hey, I get a little anxious at parties, it's nice for that too. If you struggle with panic attacks and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's free ounce of kratom.com. I had to plug that since we were talking about Brave Botanicals earlier. And of course, we'll have the Brave Botanicals booth at the Exit and Build Land Summit, as well as Holler Roast Coffee, which is Nicole's coffee business. So awesome, y'all. Signing off. Thank you so much for tuning in. Little Agora is going to say bye. He's my little farm dog. He's joining today at the office. And yeah, he's in a lot of my tiny home videos, so you'll probably see his face on the other videos on my YouTube channel. But hope to see everyone else on future upcoming podcasts, and I hope you all have a great night.